Good morning. Today is July 2nd, 2025. This is the Commissioners' weekly meeting. Eric Blank, Commissioner Gilman, preliminary remarks. Are you ready to approve the consent agenda?
Good morning. I would vote to approve the consent agenda.
Commissioner Plant,
Morning. I would approve the consent agenda as well.
as would I. Proceeding number 25A-011, 3R, City and County of Denver underpass. Mr. Farrell.
Thank you. Good morning, Commissioners. Yes, I'm Alan Farrell with the Rail and Transit section, and I'm here this morning in relation to that proceeding 25A-0113R and the recent motion for extension of time in that proceeding. The motion was discussed at the June 11th Commissioners' Weekly meeting, but due to an internal filing error, the decision was never issued. So we need to issue a decision that sets July 31st instead of June 30th of this year for compliance. And unless you have questions, I request your approval.
Commissioner Gilman.
Thanks, Mr. Farrell. I would agree with your recommendation.
Commissioner Plant.
I agree as well.
As would I, and that can be an ABC decision, Mr. Farrell.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thanks for the incisive, quick presentation to get us to our holiday weekend quicker. Proceeding number 24AL-0377E, Mr. Foreman. Time of use.
Good morning, Commissioners. Wyatt Foreman of your Commission Council. For your decision this morning, it's just a very brief decision point, whether to set a shortened response time to the motion for leave to respond to RRR filed by trial staff on July 1st, 2025. For just a bit of brief background, on September 3rd, 2024, Public Service filed Advice Letter number 1960-Electric to modify its time of use or TOU rate schedules. The Commission held an en banc evidentiary hearing on January 13th and 14th of 2025, and parties submitted statements of position on January 31st. The Commission then issued decision number C25-0278-I, which required the company to file updated tariff sheets, and the company made this filing on April 25th. And the Commission then issued decision number C25-0415 on June 3rd, establishing new TOU rate schedules. On June 23rd, Public Service, the Utility Consumer Advocate, and Energy Outreach Colorado, who I will refer to as the Joint Movements, jointly filed an application for rehearing, reargument, and reconsideration, or RRR, of the Commission's decision establishing new TOU rate schedules. At a high level, the Joint Movements asked the Commission to modify the on-peak to off-peak ratios for the winter season. Then on July 1st, trial staff filed a motion for leave to respond to the Joint Movements RRR. In the motion, staff cites to Rule 1506B and asserts the Joint Movements RRR raises material facts and issues for the first time in this filing, which staff could not have addressed during the proceeding. Staff further cites to Rule 1308C and requests the Commission shorten response time to the motion. Staff asserts that, given the time constraints associated with this late stage of the proceeding, a shortened response time will ensure quicker finality and efficiency and will provide clarity to the matter. Staff also asked the Commission to set a deadline of July 14th, 2025 for the filing of its response to the RRR. I'll just proceed to the recommendation here. Council believes staff has stated good cause to shorten the response time to the motion and recommends the Commission establish Monday, July 7th, 2025 as the response deadline to the motion for leave to respond. The Commission can then take up the merits of the motion at next week's CWM, and if it grants the motion, it can establish a deadline for the filing of staff's response to the RRR, which may be sooner than staff is requesting. So I'll leave it to you for a vote.
Commissioner Gilman.
Thanks. I agree with your recommendation.
Commissioner Plant.
I agree as well.
As do I, and that can be an ABC decision, shortening response time to the motion. So thank you, Mr. Foreman.
Thank you.
Proceeding number 25A-0194E, Mr. Davis.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Ron Davis of the Commission's advisory staff. On May 12th, Public Service Company of Colorado filed an application for approval of its renewable energy plan for the 2-year period 2026 and 2027. The plan will continue, modify, and add programs promoting distributed renewable energy resources that will cumulatively total more than 230 megawatts. And there will also be another 100 megawatts of what is called dispatchable distributed generation, or DDG. The 2-year focus of the plan ties directly to provisions in Senate Bill 24207. That new statute introduces a new paradigm for community solar gardens that's called inclusive community solar, where at least 51% of the CSG capacity is reserved for subscribers who are income qualified. Public Service is required to make available an annual capacity allocation of at least 50 megawatts in each year, 2026 and 2027, and it must acquire the entire output of those CNGs in exchange for billing credits that are paid directly by the company to the CSG subscribers, and generally that's over 20 years. In addition, the Commission must set a deadline for Public Service to offer what's called consolidated billing to CSG subscribers. And that means that both the CSG bill credit and the CSG subscription charges will be on a CSG subscriber's monthly electric utility bill that comes from Public Service. The statute, also introduces DGG as distributed generation that's paired with co-located energy storage. And that facility would be directly interconnected to the utility's distribution system and would not be behind a customer meter. Public Service must acquire at least 50 megawatts of DDG on or before June 1st, 2026, and then at least another 50 megawatts before June 1st of 2027. Public Service estimates the total cost of this plan to be about $730 million. Most of that, or approximately $693 million, is ratepayers covering the cost of the billing credits paid to the CSG subscribers or to customers implementing off-site net metering, in addition to DDG capacity payments that are paid to the owners of those facilities. The $693 million would be paid over a period of 15 to 20 years, whereas the $17.5 million that are in the plan relate to the traditional rebates and incentives, which are generally in the form of the purchase of renewable energy credits, or RECs. And those costs relate to what the company puts forward as a suite of programs under Solar Rewards. In sum, the company is asking the Commission to approve the proposed acquisition plans and incentive levels for those Solar Rewards programs, the new CSG offerings pursuant to Senate Bill 207, the new DDG procurement and associated procurement process pursuant to Senate Bill 207, the proposed acquisition plans and incentive levels for off-site net metering, as well as the Renewable Battery Connect programs, and the company's budget proposals, including greater budget flexibility, a new way to determine an administrative budget, and a plan for equity outreach and engagement. In this case, Public Service also seeks authorization to increase the Renewable Energy Standard Adjustment collections from the current 1% surcharge to a 2% surcharge, to draw down the current surplus that's in the RESA account over a 4-year period, and to simplify the way both the renewable plan costs and the cost of utility scale renewable energy resources are recovered through both the RESA and the Electric Commodity Adjustment, or ECA. In addition, Public Service asked the Commission to establish a deadline of 90 days after final decision in this case to implement that consolidated billing I described for CSG subscribers. Public Service likewise seeks approval of a consolidated billing fee that would be charged to cover the maintenance and administrative costs, and that would be accounted for in the RESA. And finally, Public Service seeks authorization to defer the expenses associated with preparing and litigating this new proceeding. The application was filed with direct testimony of 4 witnesses, and the company also filed an omnibus motion that seeks release in several areas. Regarding the timing of this case, Public Service admits that the filing came in later than expected, and that the 2022 through 2025 Renewable Energy Plan is set to expire at the end of this year. So it's uncertain now when this new plan will be approved and in place. So the company therefore requests that the 2022 through 2025 plan, with certain exceptions, be extended until this new plan goes into effect. During the extension period, the RESA would remain at 1%. The company also asked that the commission rule on this motion to extend at the beginning of the proceeding after the parties have had an opportunity to respond. Interventions have been filed by trial staff of the commission, the Colorado Office of the Utility Consumer Advocate, the Colorado Energy Office, the City of Boulder, Energy Outreach Colorado, a group called the Joint Solar Parties, Climax Millennium Company, Western Resource Advocates, and Pivot Energy and SunShare, two CSG developers, have also filed intervention pleadings. Trial staff, UCA, and the Joint Solar Parties, as well as Pivot Energy, specifically asked for an evidentiary hearing in this matter. At last week's business meeting, the commission told the decision whether to deem the application complete for the purpose of starting the clock for the statutory deadline for a final commission decision. And again, the decision for you this morning is whether to deem the application complete and set the matter for hearing.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. I guess for me, I'd be prepared to deem it complete, set it for hearing, and refer to an ALJ. But I did have two requests for supplemental direct that I wanted to run by you and see what you thought, both around the benefits and costs, particularly a standalone distributed solar. And I'd just say, for me, in the past, when there were still substantial amounts of coal and natural gas on the system, standalone solar often seemed highly attractive as it reduced both fuel costs and emissions. As we retire the coal plants and get far more solar on the system, however, the last two ERP proceedings have raised questions about the value of standalone distributed solar and suggest it may be declining. In the most recent ERP, the company appears to be claiming that there is no capacity value for distributed solar in the winter and only 10% in the summer. In the prior ERP, the company found that distributed solar mainly offset utility scale solar generation. So under these circumstances, I'd like to ask the company, as part of its supplemental direct filing and for informational purposes, to calculate how many customers could participate if we wanted to somehow limit the offsite solar program to maybe roughly half the cost the company is proposing, or say 90 to 100 million over the planning horizon. Given the tens of billions of capital spending that the company is proposing in other proceedings, I just want to explore starting to shift our customer-sited programs away from energy and more toward capacity offsets, targeting primarily the 150 to 250 hours of peak that appear to be primarily driving this new capital spending. And then second, I'd like to request a base long-term rate forecasting model run, like what the company filed in the DSP with a customer class allocation that looks at long-term revenue with and without all the distributed solar that the company is forecasting over the next 20 years in the ERP. More specifically, I'd like to see this distributed solar treated as an offset to customer load and not as a separate resource that has some deemed ELCC, like the company's treatment in the JTS. As part of this shift, I'm concerned about accurately calculating lost revenues from these investments and would like to see the company analyze it using the long-term rate forecasting tools with and without all the solar proposed in the ERP process. So those are my two requests. Commissioner Gilman, anywhere you'd like to take it on the broader case, those two requests, your own requests, or anywhere you'd like to go.
Thanks. Yeah, I don't have any issue with getting that additional information through supplemental direct. So I'm fine with issuing those. I think I'm generally fine with deeming it complete and sending it to an ALJ. As I mentioned last week, I think a lot of my initial interest here is around the relationship to other proceedings and really how we kind of deal with that and deal with optimizing that, especially if it doesn't stay with the commission and the commission has a lot of those other proceedings that may tie to some of this, like the JTS, the DSP, and then other upcoming proceedings. So, I think looking specifically at the DDG, which is brand new, as well as with Battery Connect, and really trying to ensure that we're making the most of those programs and optimizing their dispatch, optimizing their flexibility, and ensuring that we better understand kind of the value of those resources, which I understand to some degree in DDG, I think will already be done here. But in Battery Connect, probably still a to-do item. And ensuring that we're kind of integrating our approach across JTS, DSP, and, as we look to next summer with a new DSMSI coming in from Public Service Company of Colorado, we've kind of already directed them to look at the whole ecosystem of demand response to really try to better kind of work this together as an entire system to help minimize and optimize costs going forward. And so all that being said, these two in particular obviously play a role in that. And so I don't know what to do today. Like, I don't really know. I don't have an exact question. I don't have an exact answer. But, sometimes these things get set in these proceedings, and then we'll see them in other proceedings and have questions about, well, why is it done that way? Why, couldn't we extract better value if we do it this way? And it's seen as kind of untouchable. Like, oh, no, it was set over there. We can't talk about that. And I think we're going to have to. Maybe is my message, is like, perhaps we'll do our best in this proceeding as it goes forward to optimize those. But these programs may well come up in connection to those other things, and we're just going to have to learn to be more flexible to figure out how to maximize those values as we look across the whole spectrum as we move forward. I don't have the perfect answer today, but just wanted to recognize really the significant overlap, especially with those two programs, in ensuring that we have an optimized solution here. And at the end of the day, as Battery Connect, yeah, maybe it's funded through the reset, but it's probably honestly more connected to what sort of benefits we would get in the DSP, or what other things we're calculating in terms of demand response in the DSM plan. So it has really significant overlap. So I just wanted to recognize that and say, I don't know. We need to be flexible, and we need to figure out how to optimize this going forward.
Well, I mean, I'd just say I'm struggling with the exact same thing. And I tried to boil my biggest concerns down to two supplemental direct requests, mainly having to do with the fact that most of the capital spending is driven by a very few hours. And, it seems like the distributed DG targets those few hours, but maybe some of the other programs don't. And then second, how, this distributed resources were treated in the JTS, and seeing if we can start looking at it another way. So I guess I just invite you, maybe we can do this as a TBC order. And if you want to try and craft some language to see how we can get, I mean, I don't know about optimizing across everything, but maybe better coordinating and integrating would be a good first step, and include that in the referral order. What do you think about that before I turn it over to
fine. I've given it a lot of thought. I don't know that there's a direct question here, right? And this has been brought up in some of the interventions, I think, if my memory serves me, although that was a little bit ago now. So yeah, I think just mentioning it in the order in terms of like, this is a lot of interest in how do we maximize the value and the flexibility across all of these things. And we need to think about the relationship of these programs to the other goals and the other things that are trying to be done, and the other costs we're looking at being incurred, to really take the right view on what the value is and how they should be designed and how broadly they should be deployed as part of the design, if that design really happens in the res, given the relationship to the other things going on. So I think I think that's it. I don't think there's a question here, but I'm just really concerned about if we do this here. Obviously, there's a significant amount of value we would really love to see from these programs across other proceedings that just aren't involved here in the res plan.
Yep. Yeah, especially as we're looking at tens of billions of dollars of spending elsewhere, it's how can we use these programs to help manage that down? Commissioner Plant, anywhere you'd like to go, sir?
Yeah, no, well, first of all, I would support the motion to approve and refer to an ALJ, and I support your additions, both of your additions.
Thanks.
And I had a lot of the same concerns, particularly and Mr. Chairman, you mentioned this with the looking at it as a loss of as a reduction in load. I think that there's a real value, particularly as we're looking at the DSP and the costs of capacity and in feeders and substation upgrades to having that reduction of load that's coming in through those substations and being able to generate on the distribution system. And I don't know that we're necessarily capturing that. And as to the DR benefits that Commissioner Gilman mentioned, I absolutely agree with that. I also think there's a really big question about how this integrates with the phase 2 VPP or the grid DERMS VPP. Because that's really looking at deployment of assets on the distribution system to minimize those capital costs. And in the VPP, we're looking at customer-sided resources and the management of customer-sided resources. But I'd be really interested in learning how the company is planning to integrate some of these front-of-the-meter distribution-based resources with that VPP program and the behind the meter. And this is something that we talked about with respect to, distributed capacity procurements. And, that's to some extent what's happening here with the 100 megawatts that's going in front of the meter of these distribution resources. But I'm still unclear how the company is planning to integrate the VPP and the front of the meter distributed resources within that phase 2 VPP. So yeah, just to cut it short, I agree. I support it, and I would add just those comments which I could do in the TBC.
All right. So I think unless you have anything else, Commissioner Gilman, Mr. Davis, does that give you enough of what you need for a TBC order?
Yes, I will draft a TBC order. What I'll do is I'll go in to the company's testimony and set up the context for this discussion, and then craft paragraphs that capture what the commissioners discussed, including the directive for certain supplemental direct testimony, and then that can be circulated. So I will just confirm now that the date that the application will be deemed complete will be the date the referral order is issued. Okay.
Yes, that would be my request.
Okay. And then I would ask that the commission authorize the inclusion of a deadline for the filing of responses to the motion to extend in this order, since this is going to cause the case to start a little slower than was anticipated. So what I'm asking for is permission to set a deadline for that motion to extend the existing plan, the response time in the order, and that date will calibrate to when the TBC circulation is complete.
And then the ALJ will decide
The ALJ will decide. This is just making sure that there's a deadline set so that the company's request for a decision on the extension of the programs is made sooner in the proceeding than otherwise possible.
Okay. As long as it's that decision is made in the context of this TBC referral
Yes,
order.
exactly.
Commissioner Gilman,
Yeah, I think that's fine.
Commissioner Plant.
Yeah, I agree.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Davis. Mr. Davis, you're not going anywhere.
No.
Proposed amendment to the commission rules regulating gas utilities.
Right. So actually, I'd like to take the next two items together. That is the petition for the rulemaking to set clean heat targets for 2035, and that's in 25M 0234G. And that joint petition was filed by the Colorado Energy Office and the Air Pollution Control Division of CDPHE. And then and that's item 4 there. And if the commissioners grant that petition, then we can take up item 3, which is a presentation to open a proceeding and to issue a notice of proposed rulemaking, or NOPR. So let's start with the petition. On May 30th, the Colorado Energy Office and CDPHE jointly filed the petition requesting that the commission open a rulemaking and determine the mass-based greenhouse gas emission reduction target for gas utility clean heat plans for the year 2035. And this would fulfill an obligation of the commission that's in section 40-3.2-10810. Based on their analysis of the historical data and the statutory targets for statewide greenhouse gas pollution, they propose a 2035 clean heat target reduction of 41% from a 2015 baseline across the 3 gas distribution utilities that file clean heat plans. The petition explains that this proposed target represents an extrapolation of the regulated gas utilities' contribution to statewide greenhouse gas pollution in 2035 when using a linear regression of the historic contributions in 2015 and the statutorily established contributions in 2025 and 2030. The petition further recommends that the commission set clean heat targets only for the year 2035 at this time. The petition notes that Colorado statutes set a separate deadline of no more later than December 1st of 2032 for establishing the targets for 2040, 2045, and 2050. The petition recommends that the commission wait to establish those additional targets until it has more information about the gas utilities' progress towards the 2030 and 2035 targets. By a decision issued on June 4th, the commission accepted this petition and established deadlines for interested persons to file comments on whether good cause exists to proceed to grant the petition and commence a rulemaking. 2 responses were filed, one from Black Hills Colorado Gas that states that while it appreciates the analysis and proposals submitted by the petitioners, it does not agree with the proposal to establish that target for 2035 at 41%. Nevertheless, Black Hills agrees that a rulemaking is the appropriate procedural avenue to address the proposal and any alternative target setting approach that may be proposed by participants within the new rulemaking. And similarly, Public Service Company of Colorado states that it understands that the commission is considering at this junction only whether to open a rulemaking, and that the substance of the proposed target of 41% would be considered within the rulemaking. And within that framework, and considering that the commission must determine that target and then reflect the changes in its rules, the company agrees that a rulemaking is the appropriate next step. It also agrees with the petitioners that this rulemaking should be limited to the 2035 target. And no comments were filed in response to the initial comments. So the first decision before you now is whether to grant the petition for rulemaking, and if the petition is granted, whether to open a proceeding and to issue a NOPR. So I propose that you first take a vote on whether to grant the petition.
Commissioner Gilman,
Yes, I agree with granting the petition.
Commissioner Plant,
I agree as well.
as do I.
Okay, so we've prepared a notice of proposed rulemaking decision with an attachment showing potential rule changes, and that would affect Rule 4728 of the Commission's rules regulating gas utilities. That's the rule where the Commission sets forth the clean heat targets, and it's within the set of rules that govern clean heat plans, or that's Rule 4725 through 4734. As explained in that draft decision, the Colorado General Assembly has already established the targets for 2025 and 2030. The target for 2025 is at 4% reduction as compared to the 2015 baseline, of which not more than 1% can be from recovered methane. The target for 2030 is a 22% reduction as compared to that 2015 baseline, of which not more than 5% can come from recovered methane. The draft decision further explains how Public Service, Black Hills, and Atmos Energy Corporation have each filed an initial clean heat plan. The draft NOPR then goes on to state that 43.2.108.10 delegates to the Commission the task of setting that target for 2035. The draft NOPR decision concludes with an explanation that the proposed rule changes are based on the recommendations within the petition that you just voted on, and that would set a target of 41% compared to the 2015 baseline for 2035. And the NOPR proposes for comment how the gas utilities may use recovered methane to achieve the target. The NOPR sets deadlines for the filing of written comments prior to the hearing, and that hearing we suggest would be before the Commission en banc on September 18th. That would allow for the filing of additional written comments after the hearing and would permit the commissioners to deliberate and adopt an order establishing the target for 2035 before the December 1st, 2025 deadline in the statute. So now the questions before you are whether the Commission will adopt the draft order as the notice of proposed rulemaking, and whether to discuss this morning if it's necessary to amend that draft order with additions or other changes, or to further modify the proposed revisions that we've suggested to Rule 4728. So I'll turn it over to you now for discussion and votes.
Commissioner Gilman.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Mr. Davis. Appreciate you setting it up, and I appreciate the petition coming in to get this all started. I wanted to talk about two specific items today. First, with respect to what year targets should be set as it relates to the petition and the NOPR, as well as to the recovered methane maximum piece of this as well. So first, with regard to the greenhouse gas targets post 2035, I would be interested in this NOPR to get comments on the wisdom of essentially kind of the minimum approach of just setting the greenhouse gas reduction target for 2035 and not beyond. This would leave us planning less than a decade in advance, and obviously some concern around that is that we regularly deal with hundreds of millions of dollars in expenditures each year, which are depreciated over closer to 60 years. So longer term planning could be a crucial tool to ensure that we're spending ratepayer money wisely with the longer range trajectory in sight, especially given how deep 2050 statewide greenhouse gas targets may be and may translate into per sector. So certainly it's possible that those could help inform strategic shorter term vision to ensure we're not working at cross purpose by not having the longer range goals in mind. The uncertain future and trajectory of both greenhouse gas emissions and the sales forecasts are regularly referred to in proceedings, showing how the longer term uncertainty can impact current planning and strategy. So while the petitioners argue that waiting years to set the 2040 and 2050 targets will allow us to gain more information about the gas utilities' actual progress toward the 2030 and 35 targets, the statute as I read it, appears to set a floor for those leader targets to, quote, at a minimum, ensure that the gas distribution utilities greenhouse gas emission reductions will be proportionate to the residential, commercial, and industrial sectors' contribution to the greenhouse gas reduction goals, excluding transport customers that report their own emissions to the EPA. And that's for the later years. So although the exact targets may be informed by considerations on the success of the programs thus far and the commercial availability of different technologies, I'm curious to hear from commenters more about if this floor already exists and what information we know about perhaps what the minimum performance looks like in those later years already. So with regard to this item, I'd like to specifically elicit comments on 2 questions regarding this. First, I'd like to understand if there is currently enough information about what the gas distribution utilities proportionate contribution should be from 2040 to 2050 as they relate to the residential, commercial, and industrial sectors' greenhouse gas reduction targets in those years. Additionally, in the event that commenters indicate there is not currently enough information about the proportionate share of those goals or those goals more generally, I'd like to understand from commenters if there are any specific planned activities, rulemakings, or legislatively directed actions that intend to make those calculations more clear, and if so, what are they and on what timeline? I think that will allow us a lot better insight into how those later year targets may be set if they're not set in this rulemaking and upon what information they should be set. So I can stop there. My other items on recovered methane, which is a little bit of a change. So the request here would just be on those 2 prompts for comments within the NOPR with regard to setting later year targets and the necessary information.
That makes sense to me. Commissioner Plant?
Yeah, that makes sense to me. And Commissioner Gilman, are you proposing a any sort of a methane target, or are you just asking for or a maximum amount, I guess, is what has been done in the past, that can be met by methane, or are you just asking parties to make recommendations on that?
Yeah, I'll get to the recovered methane piece. This is really just on the greenhouse gas goals post 2035.
Gotcha.
And if we should essentially delay setting those goals as well, and really trying to understand what information is out there, what processes are in play to give us more insight into what those future years would look like, really specific to the greenhouse gas goals question. And then I do have a couple items on the recovered methane to bring up after this.
Okay. Yeah, I agree with that. I'm interested in relatedly in just understanding if, I mean, it seems like what CDPHE is proposing here is essentially a linear reduction. So it comes out to about 20% every 5 years. And I wonder if that's right. Is that the right approach for us to take? Is there something that would indicate either that, there's going to be an acceleration in people moving off of the gas system towards the end of the period that would instruct us to go in a different way, or if the market would be following some sort of an S curve, or whether we should be considering that as we're setting these targets, or if the linear approach is the right way to go. I'm just not sure.
Yeah,
Commissioner
I'm
Gilman?
not sure. There's certainly some language with regard to kind of the growth of the market and what's going on. But I also look at this language in statute where we're supposed to look at the proportionality of what is supposed to be obtained in those sectors, and therefore what the role should be. And so that's why I think it would be a good question to figure out what's really out there that even tells us that for the out years in this potential planning horizon.
Yeah.
Your other issue, Commissioner Gilman?
Yeah, so moving on to the second topic, recovered methane inclusion and the maximum amounts. So based on my read, we appear to be statutorily directed to determine both whether recovered methane should be included in any future plans after 2030 and the targets with which they could achieve as a maximum amount of recovered methane. And I'll admit we have pretty small amount of current data on this, having litigated only one plan per utility, essentially. However, the initial data may not indicate this to be currently among the most cost-effective paths to greenhouse gas reductions. So it seems to me the most appropriate path forward is to carry forward with the 5% share prescribed by the legislation for 2030. I'm not seeing any specific basis upon which to change that value, although I think indications from the litigated proceedings have not tended to show a more promising path that would argue for a higher limit at this point. So if I can, I think it would be most helpful to pull up a red line that I think Ms. Kunkel has to show you how this would look in the potential rule language.
Ms. Kunkel,
Is this the 4728 or the 4032-108?
4728.
Okay, perfect.
So yeah, I put that.
Thank you. Can you just scroll down a little? So it'd be in C where we list in the attachment the 41%. It's structured just the same as the prior 2 years goals, where we just indicate that 5% limit. And then let me see, I'll get to walk you through this. So in this red line, the 5% for recovered methane would apply to the 2035 greenhouse gas target, which is shown in that bullet C, while also including the language from statute about the inclusion of recovered methane in the 2035 plan, being based upon the commission's determination that such inclusion would further investment in Colorado communities, reduce greenhouse gas emissions, be cost effective, and be in the public interest. Those are listed within the statute for things upon which the determination should be made about the inclusion for recovered methane post 2030. With the understanding that maximum is also instructive for 2035. I think the determination as to the appropriateness based on those criteria could be made in that adjudication around the 2035 plan. That same language is then used in number 2, which is there at the bottom of that page, which indicates the inclusion and any limitations on the maximum amount of recovered methane for years after 2035 would be set as part of a future process with the same statutorily directed factors in that determination. Bullet 3 has just moved, but now also refers to the 2035 goal, where if the commission finds that a utility cannot otherwise cost effectively meet the clean heat targets, the commission could evaluate if exceeding the recovered methane caps for each of those years is in the public interest. So that's what I would recommend for the recovered methane piece in order to fulfill the statutory directives and provide guidance for that 2035 filing. So and I've gone over this with council and advisors previously, so happy to take any questions or allow you to discuss with them if needed.
Commissioner Plant.
Yeah, I support the proposed language. And while we're not, I think what you're proposing here is not to change the 5%. It is 5% of a bigger number. So it's essentially double. And as you pointed out, I think at this point, we don't really have any that has demonstrated cost effectiveness. So I think this makes a lot of sense and I support the language.
As do I. Mr. Davis, next steps.
Well, I think what we have now is a decision that could be ABC, granting the petition in 25M 234G, and then we can circulate a NOPR, recirculate the NOPR TBC if you'd like to see it, or we can use Commissioner Gilman's discussion today and proposed red lines and modify the draft NOPR that was already circulated and issue that ABC.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind taking a look at it. So if we could do that TPC, that'd be greatly appreciated. This is hitting me for the first time.
Okay.
Okay. Anything else on these two, Mr. Davis?
I don't think so, unless Ms. Harper has anything she'd like to add.
Ms. Harper.
I do have a question from council here. We're just having a flurry over here, and this might be to Mr. Davis and Mr. Gilman, and Commissioner Gilman. The question is if we'd want to make any changes, we'd want to notice any potential changes in Rule 4732 that tie into this language about making those findings about the recovered methane. Sorry to come in at the last minute here, but better late than never.
I might need to pull up 4732. What's 4732's topic?
So that talks about approval of a clean heat plan. It might be something we just want to include in the NOPR, is that the commission would consider if it needs to make any corresponding changes there that tie into this language about making findings.
Yeah, I think that sounds like a reasonable way to go about it. I mean, I think the way you tried to go about C is kind of respecting the statutory language about making the determination if, and we just simply don't have the information right now, so it a little bit punts that to the adjudication. So if you think we also need to notice the approval piece, I think that works.
Would you have any concerns with that, Mr. Davis?
No, I think that makes sense. So thanks for raising this. So in the modified version of the NOPR and the rules attached to the NOPR, we will incorporate the necessary provisions from the Clean Heat Plan rules that need to tie to potential commission findings on recovered methane.
That works for me.
All right. Anything else on this one, Mr. Davis?
I don't think so.
All right. 24R-0168EG, the 291 rulemaking.
Right. So for our last item on today's agenda, we'll turn to the application for rehearing, re-argument, or reconsideration to decision number C25-376 that was filed by Public Service Company of Colorado. This is in the rulemaking where the commission is promulgating rules to reduce rate case expenses pursuant to Senate Bill 23291. Public Service takes issue with one set of modifications to the rules that were adopted by the commission when it took up exceptions to ALJ Garvey's decision number R25-215. As explained in the NOPR for this case, a primary purpose of this rulemaking was to fulfill the requirement in Senate Bill 291 that the commission adopt rules to limit the amount of rate case expenses that a utility may recover from its ratepayers. ALJ Garvey focused squarely on this purpose in his recommended decision, emphasizing that the commission proposed a full set of provisions governing utility filing requirements and procedures for base rate cases, with the intent to examine whether such provisions would lead to a reduction in incurred rate case expenses. But he found that in some cases, the proposed rules in the NOPR could actually increase rate case costs. And he noted that since Senate Bill 291 took effect, procedures and schedules that were developed in 4 significant litigated base rate proceedings where parties were directed to confer and bring forward consensus provisions Those cases and those consensus proposals did not have any of the provisions that were being proposed in the NOPR. The recommended decision notes that several participants commented that those proposed rules were unnecessary, that they were burdensome without any purported benefits, and some would have potentially the opposite effect than limiting rate case expenses. In its decision on exceptions, the Commission mostly agreed with the LJ regarding the elimination of the bulk of the rules proposed in the NOPR related to required filings and mandatory rate case procedures, but the Commission nonetheless modified the rules attached to the recommended decision by retaining certain provisions that required mandatory disclosures of data and information. And the Commission supported the retention of those requirements in its decision on exceptions. In its RRR, Public Service objects to the promulgation of what became Rule 3352-4352. Public Service argues that the rule requires extensive disclosure and other requirements that are not only difficult to interpret in some instances, but are also difficult to comply with, that seek information that does not exist or that are likely to materially increase the time and cost required to prepare and litigate a case. Public Service further argues that many of the required disclosures are extraneous to the matters at issue in a base rate case, particularly those cases that are based on a historical test year. Public Service also contends that there's no record evidence supporting the adoption of the rules, and that it argues that if the Commission were to adopt such rules, it would potentially run counter to the requirements of the State Administrative Procedures Act and the statutory intent of Senate Bill 23291. Public Service then goes on to express its support for the rationale set forth by LJ Garvey in the recommended decision, explaining why the disclosure rules should not be adopted. In addition to its primary request, that is the Commission strike Rule 3352-4352, Public Service puts forward an alternative version of that rule. One general and broad modification of that modified rule is that it would strike the provisions requiring the upfront filing of information and data for forecasts. According to Public Service, the rule as adopted by the decision on exceptions would be impossible to satisfy. Public Service says that it does not have, nor does it create 10-year forecasts. Instead, it only has project level detail over a 5-year financial planning period, and that beyond 5 years, the company uses high level estimates, inflationary factors, or other escalators to get to the final years of any forecast. The company explains that this is standard practice in many industries, but moving to a 10-year forecast would require extensive work and additional resources across all areas of the utility. Public Service concludes that the cost to produce the forecasts would far outweigh any benefits, and argues that such outputs may not be of much use or value to the Commission or intervening parties, given that there would be significant uncertainty in the latter half of the forecast period. In sum, Public Service argues that the 10-year forecasts required in the disclosure rules are unreasonable. But as an alternative to the forecast, Public Service suggests that the Commission instead require the rate-regulated electric and gas utilities to file a long-term rate forecast annually in some sort of M docket. Public Service states that the Commission could ask the utility to file forecasts in the same manner as Public Service has done in other cases and for other filings. Public Service suggests that this M docket process could serve to align long-term rate forecasts with utility requests in rate case filings rather than be fixed in the rules. Public Service then devotes most of the balance of its RRR to presenting an alternative version of Rule 3352-4352 that retains some of the elements of the disclosure rule, but removes all of the forecasting disclosures. And while the company's primary objection to the rules adopted by the exceptions decision is Rule 3352, 4352, it also asks the Commission to add the term base before the rule reference to rate case in 2 instances elsewhere in the rules to clarify that the required information on prohibited expenses need not be provided by utilities in any standalone Phase 2 rate case. So I propose to set up votes for you as follows. I'll first present the primary request that the Commission not adopt Rule 3352, 4352. And then, depending on how you vote, I'll present the requests that tied to a decision to adopt the rule with or without modifications. And if the Commission seeks to modify the rule, I'll present the questions whether the Commission will strike all of the required disclosures that relate to forecasts, and if so, whether to open an M docket. And then we'll go through the various provisions within Rule 3352, 4352 as necessary. And then before we conclude, I'll take up that last bit about the other changes the Public Service seeks to the rules that don't relate to 3352, 4352. So I guess the first decision point, if you want to go that path, is whether to grant Public Service's request that the Commission not adopt Rule 3352, 4352.
So I guess I'll just start off saying, after spending more time talking with advisors and counsel, I'm probably leaning toward granting the company's request to strike the disclosure requirements in 3352 and 4352. We can always continue to ask for the materials we want on an individual case-by-case basis, as we've been doing, and I'd highlight our intent to do so in the order. But really curious to hear what you guys think. Commissioner Gilman?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the intents of 291 are a little difficult to walk the fine line of getting all disclosures while not increasing significantly the effort and cost to do so. You know, if something doesn't already exist and we need it disclosed, clearly there's probably a cost and effort there. So, so this has been a tough balance, I think, to strike in total. But I tend to agree with you on this matter at this point. It seems best to grant their request, and agree with you on a case-by-case basis. We can see what's needed and certainly request information as it's needed in order to process the proceeding.
Commissioner Plant?
Yeah, I agree as well.
And I guess, Mr. Davis, I do have some thoughts on the long-term forecasts in the M docket. Do you want to tee that up, or should I just jump into that?
I think you could just jump into it. I think this would relate to the company's request or proposal for an M docket, and then an alternative to an M docket that we've discussed with the commissioners individually is whether there's interest in doing another rulemaking that's, you know, free from the requirements of Senate Bill 291, but could examine the you know, forecasts and the role they play in rate cases specifically. I will add that one potential benefit of the M docket is that the forecasts would be in a single place and not tied to rate cases specifically. And forecasts have been asked in multiple cases, and there might be some benefit in having consistent forecasts.
So I appreciate that recommendation, and would probably go the M docket route and try and order. I don't know how much we can do here, but as much as we can do here, the filing of long-term rate forecasts and annual M dockets that, you know, was closer to what we've been doing in individual rate cases. You know, for me, given that utilities are amortizing investments over 40 or 50 years, and given that capital spending appears to be significantly ramping up, it seems to me to be critical to understand the long-term rate impacts and how capital spending pancakes on top of prior investments. So I would be interested in following up on this, probably in the M docket, but we could take a look at a rulemaking. Commissioner Gilman, what's your thoughts on all this?
Yeah, I mean, it's not fast, but you could do an M docket and then a rulemaking to figure out what you figure out in the M docket. If you think you know what you want already, you can go straight to a rulemaking, I guess. I mean, I think either route works. Yeah, we've gotta see. I know we have some other rulemakings we're interested in as well. I'm not saying that to dissuade you from doing it, but we just need to prioritize or figure out. So do you think you'd come back with like an M docket, like a proposal to open the M docket, or what kind of timing are you thinking?
Mr. Davis, can you help us out? If we went down the M docket path, how would could we order that in this rulemaking?
Well, I think the decision could talk about the company's proposal and the commission's interest in pursuing it. To open the M docket, I think the best thing to do is for staff to assemble a team and to work out some proposals for the commissioners and to bring that back. I think that team should include, not just advisors, but members of the trial staff who work rate cases as a party and prepare testimony. And I think their insight would be valuable here. And given the nature of an M docket, I think the commissioners can take advantage of that being non-adjudicatory and working with a broader team of staff members in moving forward. I think public service in its proposal recognizes that in order for the M docket to be successful, there will have to be some coordination with the members of our trial staff. And I think that trial staff's coordination with the utilities would be greatly enhanced if the effort begins with coordination among the commissioners as well as with a broad team of staff members.
Okay. Commissioner Plant, thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that sounds like a good path forward. So I would support
Commissioner Gilman?
Yes, I think that's reasonable. And I guess as we get closer to making that a reality, we'll figure out how we'd like to handle that administratively or on the commission. If we'll all be doing it, or maybe you'll do it.
Me? Yeah, I'm happy to do this then.
But I think we can look into that once we get closer and a better framework around what it looks like.
All right. So, Mr. Davis, if we could do this as a TBC order, that'd be great.
I think that makes sense. I'm going to ask Ms. Harper to join me and help me determine whether we need to discuss potentially having authority to issue an order tolling the RRR clock in order to accommodate a TBC circulation.
Ms. Harper.
Commissioners, I do recommend that you issue a brief order today tolling the RRR for the sole purpose of tolling that deadline, just to make sure that you have time to circulate the order and make sure it has all the information that you want in there. It would just be a very brief delay.
That works for me. Commissioner Gilman?
Yes.
Commissioner Plant?
I agree.
And does that give you what you need, Ms. Harper? And I guess, Mr. Davis, I'm fine with the shift from rates to base rates. Would that work for you, Commissioner Gilman?
Yes.
Commissioner Plant?
Yes.
Does that conclude what we need, Mr. Davis, or did you have more?
No, that concludes everything. I'm eager to get some coffee. Thank you.
Well, we're trying to help you.
This is like the shortest meeting we've had in a month.
I think with that, before I wish everyone a happy holidays, Commissioner Gilman, final thoughts?
Nothing additional, thanks.
Commissioner Plant?
Yeah, I just have one thing. Next Tuesday, the 8th, at 4 o'clock, we're going to be having a virtual public hearing on the on-bill finance proposal. That hearing is happening on the 10th and the 11th, but we'll be having a public comment period from 4 to 6 on the 8th. So I'd encourage people to participate. Thanks.
Sounds great. Thank you, Commissioner Plant. With that, we're adjourned. Hope everybody has a great holiday.